Right now, someone weaker than you is winning. Why? Because they appear certain. They speak without hesitation. They move as if everything belongs to them and the world accepts it as truth. Meanwhile, you pause, you analyze, you wait for the right moment, the right words, the right feeling, and while you wait, someone else takes what was meant for you. Confidence is not a personality trait, it is a weapon. And if you don't wield it, someone else will strike you with it. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. The bold advance even without skill, the hesitant fall behind even with brilliance. Because power never belongs to the best, it belongs to the most certain. This is a turning point, not for motivation, not for comfort, but for control. Here you will learn to erase hesitation, to speak like a ruler, to move like a man who expects obedience. Watch closely. From this moment, your weakness is no longer allowed. It will be destroyed. It will be replaced. You were not born weak. You were shaped into it. By repetition, by rewards, by rules. Trained to obey. Trained to seek approval. Trained to ask, is this allowed? What lives in you now is not a man. It is a servant, conditioned to please, programmed to submit. A loyal dog flinching at judgment, waiting for permission. That voice in your mind that hesitates, that overthinks, that apologizes before speaking, that is not you. That is the inner servant. And unless you kill him, you will never be free. Machiavelli never whispered. He commanded. He never waited to be understood. He acted and let others follow. He never asked for power. He seized it. Because he knew those who beg for power are unworthy of it. Your transformation begins with inversion. Each time you want to shrink, expand. Each time you want to explain, pause. Each time you want to apologize, stare. Because dangerous confidence does not come from readiness. It comes from doing what the inner servant would never dare. You walk faster, you take space, you stop nodding, you stop softening your voice. You speak as if your words are law, not suggestions. Confidence is not a mindset, it is an identity, and it is forged in defiance, not against the world, but against the version of you that still craves to serve. So here is your first rule. If it makes you small, destroy it. A thought, a habit, a person, destroy it. If it makes you hesitate, face it. If it makes you weak, reject it. If it seeks to be liked, laugh at it. The world will tell you to be kind, polite, agreeable. But here is the Machiavellian truth. Nice men are tools, they are used, they are discarded, they are replaced. Powerful men are not nice, they are precise, measured, controlled, calculated. And it begins with killing the voice inside you that begs to be accepted. You do not need permission, you do not need validation. You need only one thing, the will to become feared. Not by others, but by your former self. Because once the servant dies, the ruler awakens. Powerful men do not announce themselves. They arrive with presence, not in their voice, but in their silence, in their stillness, in their stare. You do not need to be known. You do not need to be liked. You need only the atmosphere to shift the moment you step in. That is how a man owns the room, not because he was told he does, but because he acts as if he always has. Machiavelli saw this in the courts of power. The true rulers were not always the kings. Sometimes it was the quiet figure in the corner, the one who rarely spoke. But when he did, the entire court leaned closer. Silence is control. You think speaking makes you dominant? It does not. It makes you predictable. The silent man is the danger, because no one can read what he is preparing. When you step into a room, you don't search for permission, you don't scan faces for approval, you observe, you absorb. You allow the others to rush and display themselves while you calculate. Your posture speaks before your mouth ever does. You move slowly, not from doubt, but from certainty that you are in no hurry. Predators never waste energy until the strike is required. Until that moment, they wait calm, steady, prepared. Most people don't notice how quickly they move, how quickly they talk, how often they interrupt, because they are trying to impress. because they are still living under someone else's judgment. But when you enter, like you already own the ground, you don't speak to impress. You speak to decide. Every line you deliver feels complete. Every word lands as if it's the final verdict. People begin to listen differently. They don't oppose you. They adjust themselves to you. And when others speak, you let them go first. You let them reveal their hunger, their insecurity, their weakness. Because the one who speaks first usually exposes what he fears, and once you see it, you can bend him at will. You don't chase energy, you create gravity. Confidence at this level isn't about being liked. It's about making others doubt themselves just by being near you. So you carry yourself as if you've already won. Not with arrogance, but with the calm of someone who doesn't compete because he has already chosen himself. If they respect you, fine. If they don't, even better, because indifference to approval is the final stage of power. And if the room wasn't yours when you entered, by the time you leave, they'll remember it as if it was. Not because you demanded it, but because you didn't need to. Words are not just sounds, they are weapons. And most men speak as if they're asking permission to exist. You recognize them instantly. The rising tone at the end of each phrase. The nervous laughter, the endless, I think maybe, I'm not sure. They speak like they're apologizing for taking space. That isn't speech, that is sabotage. Machiavelli understood this truth. Power lies not only in what you say, but in how you say it. When you speak, like denial is impossible. People don't examine your meaning. They submit to the weight of your certainty, because here is the reality. People are not logical. They are emotional. They do not follow truth. They follow conviction. If you sound certain, they assume you're right. If you hesitate, they assume you're not worth hearing. So what does a Machiavellian voice sound like? It is slow, calm, decisive. You speak as if your words are not open for debate, as if each sentence is a decree. You speak like a man who already expects obedience. Even if you stand in a room of experts, if you sound like the decision they will yield, that is the first rule. Sound like the ending, not the beginning. And here is what few will ever tell you. You don't need constant speech to earn respect. In fact, the more you talk, the more chances you give others to dissect you, challenge you, or worse, lose their fear of you. Speak less, mean more. When you do speak, cut out softness. No filler, no excuses, no apologies. Never say, I'm just saying. Never say, I could be wrong. Never say, I don't know if this makes sense. Those are escape routes for the weak. Burn them. Say what you mean and leave it there. Let others wrestle with the silence that follows. Because silence after strength is power. It dares people to test you, and most will not. Why? Because they're too afraid of what else you might unleash. Understand this. Your true message is not your words, but your tone. Words are the surface. Tone is the depth. A calm, grounded, deliberate tone declares your place in the hierarchy. If you want to rise, lower your pitch, slow your rhythm, strip away nervous energy, sound like a man with nothing to prove and everything under control. Sound like someone who has already decided and expects the world to follow. You don't win conversations by being louder. You win them by speaking in a way that makes others feel. Your words are not suggestions, they are facts. This is how rulers speak, how generals speak, how kings in exile speak before reclaiming their thrones. And if someone challenges you, never defend, redirect. Don't argue, don't explain, don't justify. Just say, I disagree. Or better yet, that's incorrect, and then move on. Because when you refuse debate, you send a terrifying signal that your reality is not open for negotiation. That is how you command a room without ever raising your voice. Confidence is not volume, it is gravity. It is the unseen weight behind your words. The assumption that when you speak, others must listen. When you speak, the room should feel it, not through noise, not through arrogance, but through certainty that cannot be shaken. You are not trying to be right. You speak like someone who cannot be wrong. You are not trying to be heard. You speak like someone who doesn't care if agreement comes now because it eventually will. That is power. And from this moment forward, it is how you speak or you remain silent. Confidence without control is decoration. You can walk tall. You can speak smoothly. You can move with authority. But if a single sentence can trigger you, you are not powerful. You are exposed. This is where most men collapse. They master presence, they master speech, but their emotions still belong to everyone else. A whisper of disrespect and they react. A compliment and they soften. A silence and they unravel. You are not free until you master the hidden war, the one inside your own mind. And that begins with rewriting your identity. Machiavelli knew this in the courts of power. He did not fear enemies, he feared dependency. He did not trust affection, he trusted control. Because once people know what moves you, they know where to push. And once they know where to push you, stop being dangerous. You become manageable, and manageable men are thrown away the moment their use is gone. So here is the transformation. You stop being the man who reacts. You become the man who calculates. Someone insults you. You don't explain. You observe. You collect data. What are they reaching for? What are they covering with the insult? Someone praises you. You don't melt. You analyze. Why this praise now? What do they want? Someone ignores you. You don't panic. You grow colder. Silence becomes your weapon, not your wound. This is psychological untouchability. Not emptiness, but unshakable strength. You feel everything, but you act on nothing unless it serves your outcome. When someone tests you, you don't lash out. You show no visible discomfort. Why? Because your mind is not public property. It is a fortress, and you decide who enters. That is how you end manipulation. Most men are laughably easy to control. Tell them they're not enough and they over-explain. Tell them they're amazing and they chase you. Withdraw your attention and they beg for it back. That is not power. That is programming. And until you break the code, you remain a tool for someone else. So how do you rewrite it? You kill the need to be understood. That is the root infection. The hunger to explain yourself, to be seen, to be validated. It is what makes you controllable. Burn it. You don't exist to be understood. You exist to move the world around you strategically, surgically, silently. You kill the fear of rejection because the Machiavellian mind doesn't chase acceptance, it controls access. You don't want to be invited in. You want people to wonder what happens when they are no longer allowed near you, and you kill the habit of reacting emotionally. Emotions are real but useless unless weaponized. You're angry, use it as fuel. You're insulted, use it as leverage. You're doubted, use it as silence. And let results speak later. This is how powerful men are formed. They don't turn robotic. They turn undeniable, because once no one can move you emotionally, they can only watch you move with precision and fear. What you will do next? Let others chase peace and understanding. You chase clarity and control, because the world doesn't care how you feel. It only reacts to what you project. Certainty, direction, gravity. And when your identity becomes unshakable, you become dangerous. Not because you're violent, not because you're loud, but because you're unreachable. The people around you will try, they'll test you, they'll praise you, they'll ignore you, they'll tempt you, but nothing works. You remain the same, cold, calm, calculated, and in time they stop trying to manipulate you because they realize something terrifying. You are the one man they cannot move. This is the final transformation, not posture, not speech, not appearance, but identity. You are no longer shaped by others. You shape the room, you shape the rules, you shape the outcome. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to be accepted. You don't need anything from anyone. Because now you belong to no one, and that is what makes you untouchable. Rejection feels like a wound to the weak. To the powerful, it is a signal, a gift, a message from the world, saying you were too available, too obvious, too desperate, good. Now you know what must be destroyed. Understand this. Rejection is not personal, it is positional. People reject what they believe they can survive without, so if they said no to you, it means they believe they lost nothing. That is not an insult. That is intelligence. Now you know where they stand and where you stand, which means you can now position yourself to strike back later when they are weak and you are untouchable. Step 1. Never appear affected. The moment you show pain, they win. It's not even about them, it's about your legend. A Machiavellian mind doesn't panic when the door shuts. It makes the room colder. You weren't rejected. They were disqualified from accessing you. Rejection is only real when you acknowledge it, so you don't react. You evolve. Step 2. Withdraw your presence like a weapon. What happens when something taken for granted vanishes? You begin to feel its weight, its value. That is exactly what you do when rejected. Disappear. No explanations, no emotional farewells, just a calculated absence. And while they feel the void you build, Machiavelli said men should be either treated generously or destroyed because they seek revenge for small injuries but not for wounds too severe. So don't hurt them. Make them irrelevant. Make your silence louder than words. Make them question where you went, how far you've gone, and if they ever had access to you at all. Step 3. Reframe the narrative. Rejection only has power if it looks like you were chasing something, so rewrite the story, not for them but for yourself. You weren't rejected, you excluded yourself from a game too small for you. You allowed them to say no because you were studying their behavior. You gave them one opportunity to prove they had the discernment to recognize power. They failed, and in that failure they revealed more than words ever could. They showed you their blindness, their inability to see beyond their comfort, their lack of vision for what true strength looks like. And when someone fails to recognize power, you don't argue, you don't explain, you don't repeat yourself. You vanish and you upgrade. Because if they couldn't see you, then they were never meant to be part of where you are going. Step 4. Convert rejection into control. This is the pivot where most collapse, but where you rise. Most people beg to be let back in. They scramble for second chances. They let desperation stain their image, but not you. You understand that rejection is not chaos. It is clarity. It is the cleanest mirror you'll ever face. Most people wander in fog, not knowing who actually respects them, who quietly despises them, who is waiting for them to fail. Rejection slices through the fog like a blade. Suddenly you see with brutal sharpness who is blind to your value, and where your influence hasn't yet reached. That is not loss, that is intel. So what do you do with that intel? You refine your edge. You stop trying to explain yourself to the deaf and instead sharpen your voice into something undeniable. You polish your image until it reflects gravity. You build such undeniable weight around your presence that those who once ignored you are forced to explain themselves when they mention your name. They thought you were optional, but your evolution makes you inevitable, and here's the truth. The next time they come back, and they will, you won. Even need to reject them, because you've already risen beyond their reach. That is not ego, that is control. Silent, permanent, elegant. It is the kind of control that bends perception. It is the type that makes people remember you without you reminding them. Step 5. Weaponize your comeback. Here is where the amateurs reveal themselves. They chase revenge. They waste energy on petty games. They look backward instead of forward. But a Machiavellian mind knows revenge is a leash that ties you to your enemy, and you cannot afford chains. The goal is never revenge. The goal is control. Revenge is emotional, but Machiavellian power is always calculated. So you don't to waste your fire trying to get back at anyone. You let time do the cutting for you. You disappear into the shadows, but you are not idle. You are constructing a version of yourself so elevated, so sharpened, that your very reappearance becomes a disruption. You don't rush back. You let your silence ferment until your absence becomes unbearable. You reappear only when your presence creates discomfort, only when your existence itself disturbs the balance, only when your success becomes so visible that they cannot escape it. That is when you return, not with noise, not with desperate validation, but with precision. The person who once rejected you now finds themselves forced to witness you dominate the very space they thought you didn't to belong in. And when that moment arrives, you do nothing. You don to gloat. You don to explain. You don to poison your own triumph with sarcasm or spite. You offer nothing but presence. Sometimes a simple glance is enough, sometimes no glance at all, because now you are not trying to be accepted. You are setting the standard, and they are left scrambling to catch up. That is power. The final word: rejection is not defeat. Rejection is the test, the filter, the fire that burns away weakness and leaves only steel. It shows you what needs to be cold, what must be cut, and who must be left behind. Remember this clearly. You were never rejected. You were redirected. Redirected toward the version of yourself that does not ask twice, that does not flinch, that does not sit quietly, waiting to be chosen. You were forced into becoming a creature of clarity. And now the silence you build in will birth the force they cannot deny, even if they beg to. You have been reshaped. Not motivated, not inspired, reshaped, rebuilt from the inside out while no one was watching. You killed self-doubt, not with empty affirmations, but with relentless action. You stopped waiting for permission. You stopped waiting to feel ready. You moved, and by moving, you learned the law that power does not belong to the perfect. It belongs to the bold. You took the rejection they thought would bury you, and you forged it into fire. You let it fuel you until no one could look at you without feeling the cost of losing you. And here is the unspoken truth. People notice scarcity. They notice when the access they once had evaporates into silence. You became scarce, strategic, silent, and that silence screamed louder than words. You stopped entering rooms, begging to be accepted. Now you own the room with presence, posture, and precision. You don't need applause, you don't need approval. You speak with the certainty of a man who knows that disagreement is expensive, and most cannot afford the cost. Above all, you rewired your identity. You cut the strings that made you predictable. You severed the weaknesses that made you easy to move. And in their place, you built an identity unreachable, untouchable, emotionally impenetrable. They cannot provoke you. They cannot tempt you. They cannot shake you because you belong to no one and nothing. And that realization terrifies them, because a man who belongs to no one cannot be controlled. And when you cannot be controlled, you cannot be forgotten. That is how legends are carved, not from noise, not from fame, but from silence, cold clarity, ruthless consistency. That is the trinity of true dominance. And here is the secret you don to need to announce your transformation. They'll feel it in the weight of your walk, in the calm of your tone, in the void of your absence. They will know when you've entered the room before you say a single word. They will whisper when you leave, wondering if they ever truly had you at all. You become the man people watch quietly. The man who used to chase, but is now chased. The man who once asked, but now decides. The man who once sought approval, but now defines the standard himself. And let me be clear, this was never about shallow confidence. This was always about dominance. Mental, emotional, psychological. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to move the pieces, to bend the room, to shape the narrative, to leave a ghost of your presence haunting their memory, even in silence. Because true legends don't beg, they don't explain, they don't plead, they exist, and existence itself bends the world around them. That is your calling. And now the final command. If you are done chasing like this video, if you are ready to become the kind of man they cannot predict, cannot manipulate, cannot forget, subscribe. Because this is not self-help, this is war. A war waged in silence, with strategy, with presence, with psychological precision, and in this war you have become the weapon, the sharpest weapon, the quietest weapon, the most dangerous weapon, because you learned to turn rejection into the most powerful force in your arsenal. You became the embodiment of Machiavellian control. You became the one they cannot move, and that is why they will never forget you.